Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for another segment of the TEDx Learning Series. And we're just going to wait for a moment before we officially begin. I see all of the attendees are just filing in. My name is Julianne Worm, and I have with me on the webinar Melody Serafino, and we are going to dazzle you today with PR and your TEDx event. So I'm going to give the official welcome to the webinar. And I'd really like to welcome Melody. Melody, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Julianne.
It's been a real pleasure working with you, and I am Julianne Worm, and I am the founder of TEDx East in New York City, and I just do a little help out with these webinars as well because it's so fun. And so let me go through, some of you I'm sure have joined us for a webinar in the past, but I wanted to kind of go over the just protocol and what to expect. The first thing is that the webinar will last exactly 1 hour. So we've started on time, and we also like to end on time because we respect and appreciate having you join us. So the content will last about 40 minutes, and then we'll leave about 20 minutes for questions at the end. I want to point everyone on the webinar, I want to indicate to you, if you look on your control panel, you'll see there's a place for you to send in questions. And we want to make sure that everyone is aware of that and sees it, because I will be monitoring that the entire time throughout the entire webinar, and I'll be preparing those questions to share with Melody. So at any time during the webinar, please feel free to send in questions. We'll also be doing polls, and the polls will happen throughout the webinar to kind of check in and get information for us. We're going to do one in just a moment, and as I said, questions at the end. So let's go ahead and get into our first poll. Let me get it all set up here. And it's a simple one. It's just a practice one. And we just want to know, have you hosted your first TEDx event? And this is important because it helps us understand what kind of information to provide and what to make sure that we cover. And typically, since this is a practice poll, I want to let everyone know, we leave the polls up for about 30 seconds. And during that time, you'll have just multiple choice answers. We ask you to take a moment. It gives us an indication of how many people are on the call, how many people are actually listening and participating. So we're at 30 seconds. And let me go ahead and share out the results. We can see that we had 76% of you voted, and there are 85 folks on this webinar. 39% of you have yes hosted a webinar and 61 no. So that is good information. So we have about 2/3 of newbies, and that makes us very happy. And so without any further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Melody Serafino. Melody, thanks so much.
Thank you, Julianne, and hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I wanted to just give you some brief background on who I am. So I work for TED's PR firm. We're called Group SJR. We're based in New York City, and my background is in media relations. So I am constantly talking to the press, pitching stories, and helping to get great ideas out there to broadcast and print press. And I am also the TEDx go-to contact. So if there are ever any questions related to press and your events, I'm the person that you should be connecting with. And I'm the one that's approving releases and dealing with, talking to the organizers on a day-to-day basis as press questions arise. So thank you for having me here.
We love it.
So today we're going to be going over all of the elements of PR that will help you to have a successful TEDx event. And we will start with talking first about messaging, so the difference between TED versus TEDx, the elements of a pitch when you're reaching out to reporters and telling your TEDx story, what goes into a press release and what makes for an appropriate press release, how to handle coverage on the day of your TEDx event, some social media strategies, and then some general tips for everyone.
Super.
So the first and most important thing is really making this distinction between TED and TEDx. I think we all need to assume that our audience, whether it's a reporter, whether it's a TEDx attendee, doesn't know the difference and hasn't, made that distinction. So it's really important to express very clearly that a TEDx event is an independently organized TED event. It's not an official TED event. It's not, it's not TED is coming to your city or your town or your state. It's not organized by TED. It's licensed by TED, but it's a local, independently organized event. And so if anyone is, seeking comments, if there's a reporter at an event who wants to know more about TED in general or TED conferences, that's when you would direct them to me, because I can speak on behalf of TED at large. But, you as an organizer are perfectly capable and able to talk about TEDx in your specific TEDx event. And we just want to make sure that that messaging is consistent, whether it's when you're talking to a reporter, talking to event attendees, writing in your press release, that the TED versus TEDx messaging is really consistent.
Well, Melody, let me ask you something on that, just on that note as an organizer, because sometimes I find myself in situations and conversations where people will introduce me and say, oh, she runs a TED event in New York City. And I'm always like, well, no, actually, it's an independently organized. And so what would be, in terms of languaging, what kind of advice could you give people about how they might actually introduce their event if they were starting a conversation with someone? What might be some simple things they could say?
Sure. So I think, that the simplest way to discuss the TEDx event is just to simply state it's an independently organized event. And you can say it's licensed by TED if you want to take it that extra step. But certainly if someone introduces you as a TED organizer or a TED spokesperson, you want to make that correction and that distinction right off the bat and say, actually, while the events are licensed by TED, they're independent local events.
Okay, great. And there's actually a question here which I think kind of piggybacks on this, and maybe it makes sense to address it right now. We have found most people have not heard of TED, never mind TEDx. It confuses them to reiterate over and over that they are independent. They're like, what's TED? And then it gets murky.
Right. So that's why, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we get into what needs to be in a press release and in your press materials. But I think it's really important to understand the difference between TED and TEDx. And if you need to make that distinction, we actually have the language on the TEDx website that makes that distinction for people, and you can literally copy and paste that. And I think that's really the easiest way, particularly if you're emailing with a reporter and they don't understand what's going on and they've never heard of TED, which happens. Absolutely refer to that messaging, which is on the TEDx website, and all of that messaging will be, is supposed to be included in your press releases anyway. So I think that will help allay some of those issues.
And you know what, I was just going to jump in there too. One of the things I find is, and if you're speaking with someone about it, really a lot of it also is about informing people. So it's a matter of taking the time to say, well, actually TED is a conference that takes place. So I know when people don't know about TED, I'm always happy to tell them about the conference itself. And then once they understand that and the website, et cetera, the prize, and usually that's just kind of a natural conversation. Then I get into, of course, talking about TEDx and then obviously my own event. But I think it's a matter of committing to the time. Go ahead, sorry, Melody.
Exactly, and if you don't feel comfortable speaking about what the difference is, and certainly with reporters, I would always suggest that if they're asking questions about the TED conferences, it's not your job to give them that information. You should refer them to me, and I can give them the general TED background. If they're simply asking the difference between TED and TEDx, yes, you can let them know that. But if they're sort of digging deeper on what the TED conferences are, and particularly with press people who want specifics, please just refer them to me, and I can take it from there and either get them the right information or set them up with the appropriate TED representative who can get them the right information.
Super. Okay, so let's go on to poll number 2. And this is launching. Do you feel clear after this bit of the conversation about the difference between TED and TEDx? So yes, I am clear. Well, first of all, is there a difference? Yes, I am clear, and I am still unsure. And so we're at about, now we have 111 people on the call, and we're so excited to have all of you, and we're at about 18 seconds. We'll do the poll for about 30 seconds. And so far we have 75% of you voted. And it looks good. So far we have 100% of folks saying, yes, I'm clear. And I think, Melody, that 30 seconds, we're going to close it, share it out. That shows us that you have illuminated the conversation. So thank you so much.
Good news.
Okay, on we go.
Great. So the next part that I want to really talk about are the elements of reaching out to reporters or talking to reporters. You know, many of you put together TEDx press releases, and that's really great, and I get to see all of those. But it's really to help you decipher, this part is really to help you decipher what actually makes for a TEDx story. You know, TEDx events are great, and there are always wonderful speakers at them, but not every TEDx event is a big story. And so I think it's really important that when you're talking to reporters or when you're thinking about drafting that initial press release, that you have an understanding of what's compelling to a reporter. You know, what are they, think of it from their perspective, what are they interested in, what's going to hook them to want to either talk about this event or write about this event. And so there are a few different things that I think about as I'm pitching reporters in my job every day, and I just wanted to relay them to you that they might help you sort of prepare as you're writing releases or speaking to reporters moving forward. So, you know, one of the first things I always think to myself is, what's the big idea? You know, what's the theme? What's the topic? Many of you have themes that resonate throughout your events. You know, how is this related to what's going on in the news cycle? What makes this relevant for a reporter? Not just that it's a great event and there are going to be excellent speakers there, but how does it tie into the news cycle? You know, for instance, the TEDx Tokyo event, you know, it was talking about post-earthquake issues in Tokyo and in Japan. That's interesting to reporters because that's in the news and that's been in the news. So how can you position your event in a way that makes it relevant to what's either happening in the news cycle or a theme or a trend or a bigger idea that's going on? And this all relates into sort of the relevance to the reporter idea. You know, why does the reporter need to write the TEDx story that you're telling them? Why do they need to know that story? And I think part of that is also always knowing who you're talking to before you talk to them. So every time that I'm setting up someone to speak with a reporter or I'm getting on the phone with a reporter to talk to them about something I think they should be writing about, I always, you know, do a little background research. What have they recently written about? What's of interest to them? Do they have specific hobbies or specific things that they always seem to latch onto in what they write? What's the tone that they write with? That's very important as well. You know, are they a reporter who tends to be a little bit snarky or a little bit more sarcastic? Are they going to look at this in a way that, you know, might be a little bit of a negative bent? If so, let's stay away from them. You know, is this reporter someone who's really interested in the ideas that are being presented at this particular event? So it's really important to kind of know your audience in all senses, but particularly to know your audience when it comes to a reporter. And then, of course, it's always great to have some proof points. And I think, you know, we can't always have these things, but it's always nice to know that if an event is going on and it's addressing a particular issue or a particular theme, tie it into those proof points of what's going on in the news, or tie it into a stat or something that might be relevant for them. You know, tie it into something that someone has said in the news that gives it that validation. Reporters love trends. They love to know that what they're writing about is happening everywhere. They want to feel like they are on the cusp of a trend. So when they see that this is a theme, this is something that you can show is going on in lots of different places or in your particular area of the world, that's more compelling to them than just one-off ideas and events. So this is just to help you sort of understand how to deal with reporters, what they're looking for, and to be successful in that communication.
Well, and Melody, let me ask you a question, because I know that for me, and tell me if this is the wrong time, but it's kind of come up at some events will have like a launch of a new technology. That's very relevant in New York, and there will inevitably be a lot of press. But, I mean, how important is it to have a ton of press at your TEDx event?
That's a good point, Julianne. So it's not important to have a ton of press, and we really do recommend that if you're going to take the step to invite press people to an event, that you're very familiar with who they are, that they're either a personal contact or someone who you've spoken with before who truly understands TED and TEDx, and who's relevant. It makes sense for them to be there. We don't want a TEDx event to become a huge press conference, right? That's not the point of the event. The point of the event is to really showcase and highlight great and innovative ideas. And adding some reporters to the mix is just a plus, but by no means is that a requirement for TEDx organizers.
Okay, that's like super helpful because I have felt pressure in the past, but it's nice because the press is something challenging to deal with as well. So
yeah, and one other thing is, I think a lot of times people, it's not necessarily that they're inviting press to an event, but that they're letting press know about their events so that they can, let the public know what's going on in a particular community. And so in that case, that's when some of these conversations might crop up because the reporter may have never heard of TEDx, they may have never heard of TED, and so they're not necessarily asking to attend something, but if they're going to write something to sort of get people excited about attending a TED or applying to attend a TEDx event, the same holds true.
Okay, that's super helpful. Well, then let's jump into poll number 3. And we want to find out from you guys, because it's going to be our next step, is generally how do you invite and solicit press to attend your event? Do you randomly send out email invitations? Are they targeted emails? Or are they personal contacts? And I think that this is something that Melody just touched on, but I know it's come up for myself and other TEDx organizers I'm friends with. And as we finish this, I wanted to also add one little note. This entire webinar is being recorded, and it will be exported and posted online. It will be sent out to all attendees in the next 2 days. But also, if you go to the TED website, the TEDx section, there is an archive of webinars that we've done. So you will be getting this. And let's share it out. And we have only 1% said random email invitations, 37% targeted emails, and 61% personal contacts. So Melody, what do you think of that?
Well, I'm happy to see that the majority of you are reaching out to personal contacts or doing the targeted emails. I think that's great, and that's really what the strategy should be when it comes to PR. It should be the people that you know and that you know are going to be interested in this. It shouldn't be blast emails to hundreds of reporters asking them to attend an event or to cover an event.
Yeah. So that 1% random email invitations, we're talking to you. Go ahead. On to the next step.
So here's a really important component of obviously publicizing a TEDx event is putting together the TEDx press release. And I've spoken to so many of you before, either over the phone or over email, about the components of the press release, who should be pitched, what it takes to get them approved. And so I just want to go through some of these elements and some of these components to make sure that everyone's really clear on what the press release should be communicating and what messaging should be included. So a press release is really meant to announce news. In this case, it would be the news of a TEDx event coming to whatever place that it's being hosted. And it's really meant to communicate all facets of that news. So it should really be the who, what, when, where, why of the event. It's the nitty-gritty details that tells people when is this event taking place, where can they expect to go for it, how do they get tickets to it, who's going to be speaking at it, and why is it relevant. It's also a good opportunity to insert Facebook pages and Twitter handles so that people can follow the news of the event as it's playing out in real time. Now, in putting together a press release, there's a few things that we really require are included. Number one is obviously the consistent messaging that I addressed earlier in this webinar, which is making that distinction about TED and TEDx. And part of that comes from usually in the first paragraph of people's releases, they explain what the TEDx event is. And that's the opportunity to really get it out there. That's an independently organized event and that it's licensed by TED. Secondary to that is including what we call the boilerplates. The boilerplates are essentially the About TED and About TEDx sections, the text or the copy that you'll find on the TEDx website. It's on there. You can literally copy and paste it from that website, and that information should always be included at the end of your release. And that's basically to help people understand what that difference is if they have any questions. So once those things are implemented into the release, the next step is getting approval. And so all press releases that are written and sent out concerning TEDx events need to be approved, and I'm your girl for that. So if you have a press release, and I know I get dozens of press releases a week, so I know many of you are already doing this, but any press release that you're planning to send out in any capacity needs to be sent to me first so I can take a look at it, make sure the messaging is on par, make sure the boilerplates are included, make sure it makes sense, that we're communicating the right information, that it's in the tone and the spirit of TED and TEDx. So if you ever have any questions about that, I'm obviously the person who can help you with that. But please continue to send me those press releases because approval is needed before those things can go wide and live in the world. And it'll also just help make the messaging process a lot easier for you. Because once it's out there and the messaging is wrong, it's going to take a lot of backtracking and following up with people to make sure they're getting it right. So let's try to get it right the first time and set the precedent, and then hopefully we won't have to deal with correcting people's messaging when they're writing about these events. The next step is obviously sending out these press releases, and we touched on this a little bit. Really know your audience, know who you're inviting. Either have it be a personal contact, or if you're sending it to a calendar listings person at an outlet to let their audience know that this is happening. Really do your research and understand who you're inviting to this event before you make that outreach. And if you get interview requests, certainly for TEDx, and you have any questions about what you should be saying to the press, or if they send you questions over email, as oftentimes they will, and you have questions about what your messaging is and if you're writing the right thing, please do not hesitate to send them to me. I know several people have sent me their drafted answers before, and I've just double-checked them to make sure everything is copacetic, and then they send it back to the reporter. And I can't reiterate this enough. If a reporter starts to ask you more in-depth questions about the TED conferences in general, please, please, please send them my way so I can handle those requests, because that's not something that you should have to be responsible for, and it's something that I'll take back to the TED team on my end.
Great. And let me ask you a couple of things that are kind of coming up here, and they're kind of a link between press releases and interviews. One is, what about press that wants, let's say you've announced your program and press wants access to certain of your speakers but not necessarily all of your speakers? What advice would you give on handling that?
Right. So I think, and I think we're going to cover this a little bit later on, but I think it's a great question, because I think, oftentimes we send something out and a press person reads it and says, okay, well, I want this story of this event, and they sort of handpick what's most interesting to them because they're a press person and they want what's most interesting to their audience. I think we always have to keep in mind that, the press that we're doing for TEDx is really about the event. It's not about the individual speakers, and we need to be careful not to be promoting individual speakers. It's really about promoting the entire event itself. That being said, if a press person comes back to you as a trusted press person, someone you've either worked with before or is a personal contact and says, hey, I'm really interested in covering this event, and I would love to see if I could speak with XYZ speaker, obviously that speaker needs to be run by that speaker, whether they're able and willing to do an interview. And also, we need that approval is really necessary, and also they need to be fully briefed on what a TEDx event is so that they understand and that they're communicating effectively. I don't want to say no speaker should do any interview ever, but I really would try to steer press away from contacting individual participants in events, and if there are questions that you as the organizer can answer, let's try to take that direction. But if someone is really adamant about speaking with one of the speakers, I would say maybe what you should do is run it by me, and so I can help you sort of navigate that process.
And you know what I'll say just from my event, because we're in New York and we often get some pretty high-profile speakers, typically we'll have a few press people that we are friendly with who attend the event, but we do it after. So the speakers want to enjoy the day as well. They don't want to necessarily be bombarded by press. So we typically, they're welcome to contact me after I check in with our speakers, but we kind of try to keep that outside of the event. Does that sound like a realistic plan?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, like I said earlier, this is not a press conference event. This is a TEDx event where you're sharing ideas. We don't want this to turn into a feeding frenzy for press people. And I think it's a great idea to take any interviews that might happen outside the event. The other thing I would say is, if at all possible, have a reporter email the questions to you in advance and have the interviewee email them back so that, we can make sure that the messaging is appropriate. I think it's easier that way than putting the interviewer or the interviewee on the spot with a reporter.
Yeah.
And in many cases, some of these people have done numerous press opportunities, but it's a way to further control that messaging and make sure it's consistent.
And you know what I've noticed for me, I'm so glad you're talking about this, because essentially if part of the big thing about TEDx is we're not selling from the stage and none of our speakers are selling from the stage, then too much press kind of defeats that purpose. It really kind of can compromise the integrity of the event, because people are then in some indirect way they are kind of selling from the stage.
Right. It's not about the personal speakers. It's really about the event as a whole. And I think that's, if we can sort of steer clear of trying to make it about any one individual, that's definitely the strategy here. It's the same way that we wouldn't want sponsors being part of the press process.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Okay, let's go on. I think we have another poll here that we're going to get into. And let me pull that one up. So here it is. Before you send out a press release for your event, you must spell check it, get your committee approval, or send it to Melody for approval. And I know you guys love these polls that we wrote because you're getting them right, so it makes us very happy. And I received another, email question, so I just want to repeat. This webinar is being recorded. It will be made available within the next 2 days, so don't worry. The entire thing from beginning to end will be recorded and will be made available, so you'll have it to review. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close that. We had 79% of you voted. 2% of you said spell check it. 8% said get your committee approval. 90% said send it to Melody. And while probably you, A, should definitely spell check it, and B, you could get your committee approval, those are options, but you absolutely must send it to Melody. That's not an option. So we just wanted to kind of make that clear. And also, I know, Melody, you and I spoke, and there's got to be a realistic turnaround time. I mean, you're amazing, but I mean, you can only be amazing so many hours a day. So how much time do you need to get these press releases back to people?
So what I generally say is about 48 hours. Now, in most cases, those releases will be turned around to you quicker than that. But, a lot of times people sort of, the last thing they do is write their press release, and then I get a frantic email that says, I need to send this out tomorrow morning, and it's 4 p.m. New York time, and they need it approved within an hour, and I do my best every time to get it turned around. But yes, I think realistically, if you can give me a couple of days to look at it, to make my edits and send it back to you, and then you can implement those edits, that's ideal.
Okay, super. All right, on to the next thing, day of coverage. Here we go.
So day of coverage, this is really about, there we go, how to go about handling media, handling coverage on the day of your TEDx event. So obviously, first and foremost, how to position TEDx and TED on that day. If you are approached by a reporter as an organizer, the first thing you should be saying whenever you're doing an interview is making that distinction of what TEDx is, that it is this program of local, independently organized events. I think we've really hit home on that several times now, so everyone can be perfectly clear. The next thing is photo and video, and I often get questions from organizers about this. While we ask organizers to video their events, we do not allow press to come in and take video of events. That is something that we avoid at all costs. We don't want press coming in and taking photographs or videos. In many cases, TEDx organizers will have hired or brought on their event photographer, and in those cases, if media is asking for photos, we really ask that the TEDx organizer is the one that is firstly getting approval from whomever is in the photo before they distribute a photo to a reporter, and making sure that it's properly captioned and tagged and given the proper photo credit. But the photo should always be coming from the organizer to the media person. The media person should not be coming in and snapping photos and then just putting up online whatever they want. We ask that TEDx organizers upload their photos to Flickr and specify captions, and there's a reason for that. We want it, A, to be consistent, B, we don't want just it to be a free-for-all for reporters to come in and take whatever they want and potentially misrepresent the event in some way, or take a photo that a speaker has not approved, and then they see themselves in the news and they're wondering why no one told them they were taken in this photo. So I think it's to be really clear, all video and photo should come from whomever is doing it for the event. It should not be something that we're allowing reporters, broadcast people to come in and do. Another note I want to make on that is that TEDx talks cannot be broadcast on TV. So if a reporter is asking you to broadcast it on television, we try to avoid that. We will give press photos, but like I said, those photos have to be approved by whomever's in the photo. Make sure that they know that you're distributing a photo, and this should come from the TEDx organizers. We don't want to see cameras coming into these events.
And then, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was just going to say on that note, I've had that happen at events in the past where I've had to actually ask people to leave because we make it really clear, that that's not possible. And we also are, and this might be helpful for other TEDx organizers, we make the announcement from the stage at the very beginning of the event that there's no filming, there's no recording, no flash photography. And so sometimes it's really helpful just to make sure when you get into your housekeeping as your event starts so that everybody knows. Because, people, it even happens at TED, people will try to do whatever they can get away with. I think not necessarily with bad intentions, but they want to have some capture of it. But it's always useful to tell people from the outset that that's not permissible.
That's great. Thanks, Julianne, for that insight. And then lastly, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the idea of speaker access, and obviously, as I mentioned, we don't want press people going up to speakers at the event. It just makes speakers uncomfortable if they're not aware that they're supposed to be interviewed for something. We just want to avoid that at all possible. So I think when communicating with reporters, we want them to be as much a part of the event as they possibly can be, but we want to also tell them that they need to be respectful of speakers and hosts and whomever at the event, so that we don't create this sort of feeding frenzy at the end where speakers are being swarmed by reporters and they're unsure of what they're supposed to be saying, or they didn't know that they were supposed to be talking to reporters. Anything that, if any reporter wants to speak with a speaker, interview a speaker, that needs to be coordinated well in advance, and it can either happen after the event, it can happen over email, but I think we don't want anyone caught off guard. This is really a day for speakers to come and share their ideas, and we're here to listen to them, and we're here to respect them, and we just want to be really careful about that. We want them to feel comfortable.
Super. And let me just on this note, because there's a few questions that have come up that are totally relevant to this part of the talk. So how should we handle requests to appear on a local cable channel interview shows? These are seen locally only.
So for interview requests, is that the specific question for local cable?
Yeah, that's what it's saying. I mean, I think like if they're, because I've had press ask me, can we interview you, which I typically am not that interested in doing, but I think that this calls out what is the roll-off of the organizer and getting,
I mean, it's absolutely okay to be interviewed by local television stations as an organizer. We don't have any problem with that. It's just, like I said at the very beginning, state that you are a TEDx organizer and what TEDx means. What we don't want is people getting on and saying that they're a representative of TED, the bigger organization. We just really want to make that clear distinction. But absolutely, I mean, if you have broadcast outlets that are interested, I wouldn't say no to them, but understand what the story is they want to tell, because I think that's really important. Is ask them those questions. Can they send over some advanced questions? I mean, that is probably the number one thing, particularly for broadcast, because it is live, it's on the spot. Know the questions in advance so you can really prepare yourself and know what angle they're taking, so that if they're taking an angle that you're not comfortable with, you can say no to the interview before you get on camera. And I think that's really important. For every interview I set up for any one of my clients, my first question to, whether it's a print reporter or a broadcast reporter or a radio reporter or a producer, I say, can you please send me some advanced questions so I know what I should be preparing? And I think that's a pretty good thing to do for any interview.
Okay, that sounds great. And another question, I think we've covered this, but I think because the question came in, it merits saying it again. Can local TV can local news channels and radio channels broadcast our TEDx conference?
No, we do not want it.
Go ahead, sorry.
Right, no, I mean, like I said before, TEDx talks, which are technically what makes up the conference, are not to be broadcast on television and radio.
Only
if
live
there's a
stream or
specific
Ustream?
question, if there's something, if there's a specific case that an organizer has a question about, feel free to just forward that email to me so I can weigh in on what I think the appropriate response is. But it's fine to be interviewed as an organizer, but we don't want them broadcasting the event.
And but the only broadcast, sorry, I was interrupting you, I didn't mean to, was it's live stream and Ustream. We can put that through live stream and Ustream so that there's a simulcast. Okay, exactly. Great. Okay, great, awesome. Well, I think we have one more poll. Oops, nope, we're going to social media. Go on, my apologies.
So social media, obviously social media is a big part of how we talk about exciting things going on in our lives today. And I think, Facebook and Twitter and blogs are really good opportunities to promote events and to, particularly with TEDx events, sort of give real-time updates of what's going on in relation to your event, to reach out to people and give them the 411 on the event. So, but there are just a few things we want to clarify about the use of social media and also talk about how you can use it in a strategic way and in an appropriate way to talk about your event. So the first thing on here is sponsors. And really, sponsors should not be a part of any sort of social media strategy or outreach. And sponsors are great because they help with these events, but it's not about them. The TEDx is really about the TEDx event. So we shouldn't be tweeting about sponsors or Facebook posting about sponsors. So I want to make that really clear. That this is not an opportunity for them to get some leverage, some PR leverage. And I know in some cases sponsors will try to push for as much as they can get, but I think, make that distinction very early on, make it clear very early on that, while you're grateful for everything that they've done for the event, the PR aspect of it is not something that they're going to have access to. We don't want this to be about promoting sponsors. It's about promoting events. So, the social media component is really about building an audience. It's about building an audience of people who are attending the event, building an audience of influencers who may not be attending but may be interested in what's going on at your TEDx event, and it's about communicating to that audience. And the most popular ways that people are communicating are via Facebook and Twitter. And Facebook, having your Facebook page about your event is a really great way to announce your speakers, to post photos from the venue, to engage people about TED Talks. The one thing I will say is that for Twitter and Facebook, the photo on the Facebook page and the photo on the Twitter handle should mirror, what your logo is and what your event is. It should be consistent so that people understand what it is. Twitter can be a really powerful promotional tool. It helps sort of start conversations and dialogue in advance of the event and during the event. It's a great way to tweet notes about what's going on at an event or what's to come back, what's to come for an event. I think social media can be very, very powerful. Just be strategic in how you use it. It really should be about excitement for an event. Building that excitement, letting people know the details of an event, announcing speakers, sharing information, and not about promoting sponsors. And really about creating what TED and TEDx are all about is creating that dialogue. And one of the other things that we have access to is the TEDx blog. And the TEDx Tumblr blog is a platform to highlight the many things that are going on in the TEDx community. It's a way to sort of make connections and use multimedia to create a story about your event. So you can be imaginative, and we have some directions on how to actually submit posts to the TEDx Tumblr blog, but just to give you some examples of how you can share the TEDx innovation story via our blog, it's really a way you can showcase amazing TEDx-related design projects. For example, your stage setup for your event, a poster that you've created for your event. It's a way to put on a Q&A or an intimate interview with one of your speakers or a TEDx organizer to highlight unique innovations that were created for your TEDx event, to kind of keep a diary of your personal TEDx experience in organizing your event. Share some of those tips and some of that advice on how to have and how to host a successful TEDx event. Focus on technologies used in your event or a new idea on how to hold a TEDx event. We really want this blog to be a shared community, a learning community. Show us what you've been doing, what you've been working on. We want to see all that hard work. Introduce us to your Facebook web page, your Twitter handle. Put up some great quotes from organizers and volunteers or audience members who are talking and twittering about your events.
Okay, awesome. Now we're going to go on to the last poll, number 5. And here we go. We're going to launch it. After your event, what can you do with the photos and video? You can show it on a local TV channel. You can upload the photos to Flickr. You can upload the videos to YouTube, or you can distribute to reporters. And of course, we're like writing little. Melody and I came up with little trick questions. We were having some fun. So, but we're essentially not fooling anyone, because as I watch the votes come in, and we have about, I'm going to wait about a couple more seconds, and we have about 60% of you having voted. I'm going to go ahead and close it and share it out. And mostly which is correct, what you can do with your materials, they get as part of the license agreement, they get uploaded to Flickr and they get uploaded to YouTube. But as Melody is saying, they're not shown on local TV and they're not distributed to reporters. They can be. I think, Melody, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. The photos can go out to reporters, is that correct? But not the video.
Well, I think if a reporter specifically requests a photo from an event, we don't want to be spamming reporters with photos from events. If a reporter who's attended an event says, I would love a photo of this, do you have it? Yes, we can give them that, making sure that we have the proper photo credits and the proper captions. But I wouldn't, we don't want to distribute photos just saying, we had this great event, here are some photos from it. It's really only if a reporter is asking for photos from an event.
Okay, well, let's do this now. You know what I wanted to do, because there's so many questions. We're going to go, these are the final tips. You want to go on to these, Melody? And then I'm going to bring Laura Stein live with us, too, because I think some of the questions she can help us answer. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to do a wrap-up.
Great, sure. So just wanted to put together some tips for everyone to help you have this, a successful press experience in relation to your TEDx event. So as we covered before, please get approval on any messaging going out via your press releases or otherwise. And I'm here for that, so do not hesitate to email me. My contact information is on the TEDx website, and I believe it will be sent around after this webinar as well. All outreach about your event should be about the event, not and its speakers and the themes, not about sponsors. So always keep that in mind. Please allow some time for me to approve your press releases. I know you get very excited, and sometimes things happen last minute and you need a quick turnaround, and I'm always happy to make those things happen for you. But because I do get so many every week, we just want to make sure we have the time to give them the full attention that they deserve. If you're ever in doubt, you have a question from a press person, you have a question about what should be in your press release, a question about social media, anything along those lines, please do not hesitate to reach out and ask me. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to be a resource for you. Think carefully about press coverage for your events. Like we mentioned before, it doesn't always make sense to have press in an event, and we don't require press to attend events. So really think carefully about who you're inviting and whether it makes sense for them to be there. And last but not least, and I've said this several times, but I'm a resource for you on anything press related. So I love meeting you all. I've met several of you before, and I'm more than happy to engage in conversations about anything press related. Or if it's something about your TEDx event that I can forward to someone else on the team and help get answers for you, I'm happy to do that as well.
Super. Okay, now we're going to go on. We're going to open the floor, and I'm going to just work some of my magic here, and I want want to. No, it's not. I'm trying to unmute Laura Stein, and it's unfortunately not letting me, but I'm going to work on that while I give you a couple questions already, Melody, that you can work on to answer. What kind of advice can you give about live blogging and live Twitter feeds during the event? For, you know, how should people handle that?
So I think, you know, tweeting about events is great. Like I said, it's starting conversations, and I think it's great to have people talking about events as they're happening. The one thing I will say is that, you know, when you're at a TEDx event, you want to be careful not to be sitting there on a phone or on a computer the entire time. And I know I've been to events where people have actually wanted to get away from the people that are sitting there on the phones all the time. It's really about being in the moment, being part of the experience. In some cases at the TEDx events, there'll be separate areas for people who want to be writing and tweeting and blogging, and that's fine. But I think, you know, respect the people, respect those around you, and understand that, you know, it's really about being in the moment. It's really about being at the event. And I'm not, it's great to sort of have that dialogue going, certainly. That's what the Twitter feed is all about, is those real-time updates of what's happening.
Okay, awesome. And then also, what about announcing speakers? Someone has sent in a question about, you know, if they have their program confirmed, you know, 6 to 8 weeks in advance, is that something a press release goes out about? I think Laura's on, and Laura, can you mute the background, the computer?
Mute the background. Oh, yeah.
You got to mute the computer because it's echoing. Yeah. Thanks. Awesome.
Is that better?
Sorry. Yeah, it is better. So Melody, go 6 to 8 weeks out if you're announcing speakers. Would that be a press release?
So absolutely, your speakers, an announcement of speakers should be part of the press release. And if the press release is being used as a tool to tell people about the event and get them to apply to attend the event, and we definitely want to give them several weeks notice so that they, you know, give them the time to do that. I generally, as a general rule, I think press releases should go out at least 2 to 3 weeks in advance of an event. And of course, you can always do another round of another pitch of the press release a week leading up to the event, but I think that initial contact should be made at least 2 or 3 weeks in advance.
Well, and how many press releases, I mean, would you recommend one, more than one for an event?
I mean, I really think it varies, but I really think that one press release, if you have all the information that you want to tell your audience, you've got your speakers, you've got your venue, you've got your details. I mean, the best press releases give all the information in one place. We don't want to be reaching out to reporters every week with an update of something new that's happening at the event. It's fine to follow up with personal contacts and reporters a week out from the event to say, hey, I just wanted to make sure that you saw this. I want to make sure you were filled in on this event and let you know that it's happening. But what I wouldn't want to get in the habit of doing is sending out a different press release every other week. I mean, at the end, it just seems like for reporters, it'll be like spam to them. Get all the information in one place, send it out at one time.
Okay. And here's a question that I think will go to Laura Stein. Most of the TEDx organizers have a audience limit of 100. I'm sure it includes press people as well. Could you please confirm this?
There is a little flexibility. You can go up to 120 with staff and press.
Okay, good to know. And there's another one. Okay, what about guidelines for small little ads? For example, at our university, there are flat screen TV that can do free advertisements for the event. Should we be included in those picture ads?
I'm not clear on where the TVs are, where they're located, what's going on the TVs. That would be a question, a very direct question to send to Lauren on my team with some more detail.
Super. And then there's a number of questions about, because we have, you know, such a big international community, what about the press releases that are in Hindi or are in languages other than English? How are members of the TEDx community getting those approved?
Well, it would be ideal if you could get them translated into English before you send them over to Melody, because otherwise we have to find somebody to translate them. The press releases have to come in English.
Okay, super. So that's the bottom line. The press releases must come in English and be approved. So, you know, people need to just get that worked out. And can media partners be sponsors too?
Media partners can be sponsors. They just have to be treated like every other sponsor. They don't get, you know, special rights because they're a media sponsor. They land up in the sponsor section of the website. They can get a logo in the program. You know, you can offer them. We're going to be introducing in the next few weeks. We haven't rolled it out yet. But the idea of doing a 3-second static logo on your pre and post roll, 3 seconds only. And we have designs for them, and we're going to be releasing that. So the media partner could potentially get that as part of their package. But they should be treated like any other sponsor.
Okay, great. This question, I think, Laura, is probably for you. Can a TEDx event be on a community, and I'll explain because it came in twice, on a community access cable TV? If we allow that, so essentially the organizer is saying a local access TV will give them the cameras and access to an editing suite so they can record and edit their own talks, but in exchange, the community access TV wants to play the talks on their channel.
The answer is no. TEDx events cannot be on any kind of TV right now, period.
Okay, super. And someone else wrote in that said, should we let you know if another TEDx event is not following the rules?
That would be very, very helpful. We would keep it obviously confidential. I say this a lot. You know, TEDx is given to the community. It's free to the community. The integrity of TEDx is about respecting the rules. And when somebody breaks the rules, it's affecting your community. It's really your brand to look after. And so it's helpful for us at TED to understand who isn't listening to the rules more, because we want to protect the TEDx brand for all of you, for the entire community. And so we keep the information generally confidential if you request it, and it's just really helpful for us to understand and sort of have the conversation with who's ever violating the rules. And sometimes they're not even aware they're violating the rules, but generally they are. And you know, this week in India, I just didn't renew an event for that very reason. And so there are repercussions. The only way we protect our brand and your brand, because it really is your brand, it's not the TED brand, it's your community's brand, is by keeping to the rules. So it's important, and yes, we do like to hear about things when they are, you know, affecting you.
Okay.
Can I just,
and then
can I just oh, sorry. Can I just add something to that?
Yep, go.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a little bit different from that, but another thing that it would be great if people flagged as well is, you know, I'm constantly monitoring the media that's reporting on TEDx events, and in some cases, as we've discussed, they do get the messaging wrong. So I'm always following up with them to clarify. But if you see media coming out in your countries that maybe I haven't caught or haven't seen that is positioning TEDx, not positioning TEDx appropriately, if you feel free to forward me any of those links, and I'm happy to follow up with reporters individually. I do my best to stay on top of all of that, but you know, obviously there are things that I don't always see. So that's another instance where
and that's really good. That's a really good point, because we can't monitor the media in all languages. And again, this is about positioning your brand in your community correctly. It makes for a more powerful brand for everybody in your community at the end of the day. So to the degree that we can't read Hindi, or we can't read, you know, Portuguese, I don't think I have anybody that speaks Portuguese on my team right now. It's important that if things seem a little off in the press or in the community, that someone lets us know.
Well, and right on that, I think this is something that, Laura, you can talk to about. Honestly, I don't understand the difference that you allow live stream online and TV broadcasting. Are we allowed to simulcast on a screen directly outside the main auditorium? So I think, I'm sorry, those are two separate questions. They don't understand that we can't go on TV, but we'll live stream. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what is that difference?
Sure. TED has never been a TV platform. We launched TED Talks online. We've always been a digital brand, a digital platform. We've had lots of conversations internally. We only very recently launched our Open TV project where we allow TED Talks on broadcast television. So for many communities and many territories, TED on TV is completely new. People don't really understand what it is. And so it's very complicated to then have a second property on broadcast television, which is TEDx, when people in those communities don't even understand what TED is. And then they have TEDx. So from my perspective, I need to find a way to create promos that first describe what TED is, then describe what TEDx is to the community where every TV show was being played. And then I'd also have to find a way to screen the TEDx talks to make sure that the quality going up to this new audience who's never seen TED on TV before or TEDx on TV before is of the quality that would be acceptable. And so that's going to take a lot of infrastructure, a lot of money, and a major re-engineering of processes. And we're nowhere close to allowing that to happen yet. What I would recommend is we have the Open TV project, and to the degree you could get some local channels playing TED Talks. It is for free. We offer the content for free to your local TV channels to try to at least take that first step in establishing what TED is on television. Eventually, we will get to this concept of potentially allowing TEDx talks on TV, but we're nowhere near to that yet.
What if reporters want a video clip of a talk to include as part of their story for TV?
That is fine. I think, Melody, we allow up somewhere between 15 to 20 seconds for media.
Right. I mean, if that question comes up, please contact me because we have certain guidelines and certain information that people would need to fill out. We just want to be really careful that if things are being edited, they're being used appropriately. So we just want to monitor all of that.
Okay, super. And you know what? I'm also going to and there's now, I just wanted to reiterate something you guys said. There have now been multiple questions in about sharing with TED, sharing with Laura, sharing with Lauren, people that are not following the rules. So Laura, maybe, now I just got 4 or 5. So I think maybe if you want to cycle back to that for just one moment so you can let people know exactly what they should do if they are noticing things that are not going according to protocol.
They should just email anybody on my team, and say, please keep it confidential. Here's what I'm seeing in my community. I don't think it's quite in line with the TEDx guidelines. Please advise, and we really appreciate the feedback.
And you know what? I just added Lauren to the call as well. Lauren, if you can just, I heard there was like a little bit of reverberation, but I think you got it all handled. And people are also asking, which I don't know is really necessarily relevant to this webinar, but how do they post to the TEDx blog? How do they make that happen?
So we switched to the. Hello. So we switched.
Hey, Lauren.
Oh my God.
You know what?
Okay.
Yeah, you're.
Go ahead. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, you're live. Okay, sweetie, you're live.
To the TEDx Tumblr yesterday, which is TEDx.tumblr.com. So now anyone in the TEDx community can submit their story. So you
know what, Lauren? Wait. The audio is really bad. We can't hear you. It's echoing and stuff. So I don't know what if you.
Wait.
So I can maybe fill in a little bit. I think what Lauren was saying because I have the directions as well. So people can go to TEDx.tumblr. That's TUMBLR.com and submit via that site. And there's there's a submit button on the upper left-hand side of the page, and that's where they can submit their posts. And it's pretty self-explanatory from there.
Okay, super.
And just email Lauren at TED to let her know once you've submitted a post, and if there are any other instructions and details that should go along with it.
And Melody, here's a question for you: do post-event press releases need to be approved too?
All press releases need to be approved.
Okay, great. And there's another question. A TEDx event, I think that isn't relevant. My TEDx event is at my university. How do I speak to school administrators such as deans about the event?
Do you want me to take that?
Sure. If we can get the audio fixed in where you guys are, because otherwise we won't be able to hear what you're saying because there's so much echo. So because I think two of you are on, so you have to mute whatever one of those is in the background. You have too many speakers in the room. Or I can mute Lauren.
Yeah, mute me. Unmute you. Unmute him.
I think we mute Laura.
Okay. So Laura, go ahead. There you go. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So generally, there's enough of a track record now that I think you have some really good. You could have a really informed dialogue with your administration. There have been enough TEDx's on university campuses that have been really successful and fairly powerful as a vehicle to communicate ideas. And you can look at some of the models like TEDx USC, where the Stevens School is basically hosting a TEDx event, and it's the umbrella think tank. TEDx Denver University just did an incredible event. There are a series of Ivy League schools that are doing TEDx events. And I think you could very easily put together a really informative PowerPoint presentation for your administration that says, here are the TEDx events that have happened on university campuses, and here have been the results. I actually think that would be a really good question to put out to the Google group, because I think the other TEDx organizers that have hosted events on university campuses could potentially give you some really good material that you could include in a presentation to the administration.
Okay. There's another question, and it's from Emily, and it says, and Emily, I'm going to go ahead and answer this. TEDx has Flickr accounts. All of your, we upload our photos to our own Flickr account, TEDx East, and we tag them TEDx. But TEDx has its own YouTube channel. That's where all the videos go. But probably, I'm reading your question, Emily, you probably want to go into the branding guidelines, which lays all of this stuff out really, really clearly. I just wanted to answer that really quickly.
And if you have any outstanding questions, again, that's something to put out to the Google group, because they usually have all the answers. In fact, as a first stop, for questions like that, you should put it out to the group if you're unclear.
Yes, I think that's it. And you know what?
They can answer the questions in a more timely manner than us.
Yes, perfect. And you know what I'm going to say, because we're right at 1 hour, and I like to end on time so that we have a nice, concise recording. What I can also tell you is this. I will download all of the questions that we didn't get to, and I'll send them on, and we will work to come up with answers for some of them if they seem that they weren't included in the content. As well, we will be sending out a link to this webinar in the next 2 days so you can watch it again. A lot of these questions, as I'm sorting through, are simply stuff that's in the branding guidelines or can be found in the TEDx group. So we're going to go ahead and move on past those, and we will follow up with everyone who's registered. And I just want to thank Melody so much. You've been amazing, and Laura and Lauren, thank you guys so much. And I don't know if you guys had any closing comments, but Melody, Laura?
Well, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this, Julianne. And I just want to say I really enjoy working with the TEDx organizers, and I think when we work together and follow the guidelines that we've outlined, we can really make some successful TEDx events here.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I've just been more of an observer than participant, but I'm always happy to answer any questions. So, you can email me directly, but just to be clear, each person on my team also has some very definite functions. And so if you're unclear as to who to email for what, you can have a look at on our website. But generally speaking, Salome does anything conference related, Lauren does anything branding and editorially related. You have Melody on PR, Dave Weber does all the post-production, and Monica does any answers any application-related questions. We also have a QA section now on our website that answers a lot of the outstanding or existing questions that we've gotten multiple times. And then you always have the Google group to put the questions out to. So if you have any questions, I think a first step should be to check the QA on the website, then put it out to the Google group, and then email my team if you still don't have the right answer.
All right. Well, super. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now, and I want to thank everyone for attending and wish you a lovely day. Thanks so much.